Let me warmly welcome you all to this online discussion panel, Sharing Solutions from Nature. My name is Peter Dogsey, and I work as a program specialist at Unesco's Division of Ecological and Earth Sciences, and I'm also the co-chair of the UNESCO Task Team on Climate Change. It is my pleasure and honor to moderate this panel organized by UNESCO as part of its celebration of the 2020 International Day for Biological Diversity that takes place on 22nd May every year. This is the fifth and concluding panel in a series of online discussions that are all available on the website of the UNESCO Man and the Biosphere Program as part of our Biodiversity Day celebrations. Now I'm delighted to introduce our panel, composed of four eminent experts, namely Dr. Humberto Delgado Rosa, Director of Natural Capital at the Environmental Directorate of the European Commission, Dr. Vladimir Ryabinin, Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, IOC, of UNESCO, and Assistant Director General of UNESCO. Dr. Mechtil Rössler, Director of the World Heritage Center of UNESCO. And finally, Dr. Miguel Klüssner-Gott, Director, Division of Ecological and Earth Sciences and Secretary of the MAB program. You're most welcome. Now, let me address my first question to Dr. Miguel Klüssner-Gott, and like your fellow panelists, you will have a maximum of 3 minutes to respond to your question. So Miguel, as you are leading the MAB program and its World Network of Biosphere Reserves, can you tell us a bit about MAB and how it promotes biodiversity conservation and sustainable use, and how it may have been affected by the ongoing COVID-19 crisis? Miguel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and also welcome fellow panelists. It's a great honor to be here with you and to discuss this very important topic. You mentioned already the Man and the Biosphere Program. It's a program that will have next year 50 years of existence within UNESCO. And you mentioned already also the backbone of the program, the Biosphere Reserves. You know, in UNESCO, we have a series of 3 programs dealing with sites. And I think we will hear later from Mechtil Rössler about the World Heritage Sites. So here we're talking about the Biosphere Reserves. These are sites that integrate nature conservation and sustainable development. And of course, what for? For the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, and of course, for really improving nature conservation, but at the same time also improving the living conditions of the people in this area. So it's a quite unique exercise that has 3 zones: a central core area, a surrounding buffer zone, and a surrounding transition area. What are we speaking about? 701 sites in 124 countries of the world, including 21 transboundary biosphere reserves, means biosphere reserves that are on both sides of a political border. As we all know, ecosystems don't care so much about political borders, they continue. So also these sites go over this political border and trigger really cooperation, one, for conservation and also for sustainable development purposes between the peoples. It's, I think, quite important to mention now that this is the right moment to talk about. We are all locked down, sitting at home. I think I'm the only one in this panel sitting in the office because I had to come to UNESCO today. But you see how also the functioning of these programs are affected. We are talking about roughly 250 million people living in these biosphere reserves. We're talking about 5% of the terrestrial surface of the Earth. including 1.5% strictly protected. So this gives you, let's say, the frame, what we are talking about, biosphere reserves worldwide. So now your question is how this COVID-19 crisis affected it. It affected it, of course. We have this lockdown. It's a worldwide lockdown. This affects enormously the functioning of the sites. And I will go first, let's say, for the negative aspects. You know that these sites are, of course, established by our member states to give a sort of focus on the country, highlight it, how to improve the conditions, how to create jobs, how to have opportunities. And when talking about jobs, lockdown sites, of course, do not get visits. Lockdown sites are under pressure because other activities may develop that are not really in harmony with the philosophy. There's also a direct threat, for example, for great apes. Many of the great apes worldwide live in Biosphere Reserve, one species right now exclusively in one Biosphere Reserve. So this would mean also if the threat is coming to these sites, and I mean, the great apes are our cousins. So if there is a virus attacking human beings, it is also very dangerous for great apes. So we must be really pay special attention to that. But I would also not like to speak on negative aspects. There's also positive aspects. For example, we are now in a virtual conference here. Throughout all our networks, the way of cooperating through these virtual conferences is really improving. I think we had a very concrete new way of interacting. We also could trigger worldwide alerts. This sounds for all of us now very common, but some years ago, it would be unimaginable. So I think this is also a very positive side. When we are talking about the sites and the resilience, so the response also to these crises, I think through this worldwide joint effort, the resilience of the sites will be improved. I think we will make a major step forward. So let's also take this as a chance to change the world. Chance also to see how we get nature-based solutions from these sites to really improve the living conditions, and how we continue after the crisis, because this crisis hopefully will be relatively soon over. I say relatively because we really don't know, but how we can take nature-based solutions on board through these biosphere reserves to, one, improve the conservation part, because there's still a lot to do, and also to improve the sustainable development part. And maybe we come later in the discussion to talk more on this. So I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miguel. That's a very interesting and good introduction to MAB and its World Network of Biosphere Reserves. My next question is for Dr. Mestil Dressler. Mestil, as the director of the World Heritage Center, you have a good insight into the implementation of the World Heritage Convention in iconic sites around the world. So can you please briefly introduce us to the convention and how it deals with the COVID-19 crisis, please?
Many thanks for the question, and it's a great pleasure to be here and to exchange with all of you. The UNESCO World Heritage Convention is really a unique international legal instrument because it brings together biodiversity conservation with the protection of cultural heritage. And today it covers 1,121 sites in 163 countries, among them 230 natural, 39 mixed, and over 100 often large-scale cultural landscapes. 193 countries have ratified this convention, so it means it's nearly universal, and it provides for a global monitoring and observation network. For natural and mixed sites alone, we have 360 million hectares. The unprecedented crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic this year had a major impact on the World Heritage properties worldwide. Among them were the closure of World Heritage sites, which resulted in major socio-economic impacts, disruption of community lives. There are lots of people living in and around World Heritage sites, and aggravation of poverty and serious issues related to the monitoring of state of conservation. We produced a map, which you can find on our website and which is updated weekly, which provides a snapshot of the global situation. This map is produced as a part of the UNESCO COVID-19 campaign, Share Our Heritage, and it informs of the status of closures of natural and cultural World Heritage sites in the 167 countries they are located in. So in 90% of the countries where properties are located, they were closed wholly or partially. So you can see the situation. Many site managers informed us of the drastic economic impacts due to the loss of entrance fees, for example, into the sites, or the standstill of international, regional, national tourism, leading to a substantive loss of income for the site management and the authorities, as well for the host communities. The national and local authorities had not included such a pandemic in any of the risk assessments, and I don't think I have seen them in any of the management and risk management plans so far. Now, while sites are closed, monitoring activities by site management often continued. This was the case for natural sites, including by anti-poaching units, monitoring by satellite images or drones, or emergency interventions, of course. Nevertheless, I have to say, in certain natural properties, the absence of tourism activities combined with the challenges the site managers had in managing the properties, including surveillance and anti-poaching, as a result of funding related to the breakdown of tourism revenue, has resulted in a surge of poaching, for example. Particular measures have been implemented also in sites with important population of great apes, gorillas, orangutan, chimpanzees, or bonobo, as these primates are often monitored on a daily basis, but they could be especially vulnerable, as Miguel mentioned, to SARS or COVID. I think a better conservation at large of large intact natural areas, including natural World Heritage sites, and urgent measures to address the illegal wildlife trade are considered important to limit the emergence of such new zoonotic diseases in the future. Creating or improving the digital access to World Heritage was taken up rapidly by site managers and local authorities. This included virtual visits of sites, live streaming, for example, at Ngorongoro Conservation Area, or overflights by drones, but also site managers shared videos of their experiences. And I was quite moved by the video from Jeju Island, which is an island which is on the World Heritage list. It's a Biosphere Reserve, a geopark, but also a Ramsar site, and it's linked to intangible heritage with the women divers. So they were also quite moved that we promoted their videos on the web. And our reflection focused on support to sites in need due to the COVID impacts and the post-crisis recovery, including promotion of sustainable tourism models and emphasizing the importance of sustainable development approaches in line with the World Heritage Sustainable Development Policy. And I think overall, this is a very important part of the component of long-term response. And that for us includes also adaptation in terms of climate change, because we shouldn't forget on Biodiversity Day also the challenges because of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Meshtil, for highlighting the critical importance for Biodiversity Convention, as well as climate change, of the World Heritage Sites and the challenges posed now by the pandemic, and how you at the World Heritage Centers and sites around the world are trying to cope with it. That's great work. Let me then turn to Dr. Vladimir Ryabinin. Vladimir, as IUC reported recently, the COVID-19 crisis affected ocean observations and warning systems. So in this connection, I trust you could give us some insights into the fundamental importance of a healthy ocean for planetary sustainability, human health, well-being, and perhaps some words also of the good work of IUC for this purpose. Vladimir, over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Also I'm very happy to be on the panel with distinguished colleagues and friends. And congratulations on the World Biodiversity Day. I think it is important to introduce the organization that I'm heading. The Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO is a part of UNESCO, but it is a functional autonomous body that looks after the ocean science and engages governments in observing the ocean and protecting the ocean. Just to make the whole story very short, we have 150 member states. Indeed, the IUC of UNESCO, as we call it, IUC, runs a global ocean observing system. And under the conditions of the coronavirus, indeed, we observe a certain reduction in the observations. Ships are now basically in ports, and they're also on a lockdown. And because of that, some expensive equipment is now remaining in the ocean, being not managed. So this needs to be addressed, and we are planning now post-recovery measures to address this difficult situation, because observations in the ocean are very expensive. Importantly, the IUC of UNESCO runs a round-the-clock service, warning the world about tsunamis when they occur. And indeed, there were some cases of non-devastating, but quite noticeable tsunamis during the lockdown period. So what you would do if you are quarantined and there is a warning of tsunami? So your life, this is in danger, even more in danger during the COVID time. So IUC has developed guidelines that make it possible for people to be saved in case of a tsunami during the lockdown. So fundamentally, the ocean is a part of life. Ocean is a regulator of climate. For those people who suffer from the coronavirus, this is about breathing. So ocean produces more than 50% of the oxygen on the planet. So what we do is that we develop an observing system for the ocean that includes also observing system for biodiversity, marine life in the ocean, that is done on molecular level, on genetic level. We also run observing system for hazards in the ocean, like tsunamis and some other hazards. And this recent cyclone Harold that also affected the quarantine area in Fiji is an example of what we enable in terms of predictions. And then we also contribute to policies. And there will be hopefully soon an extension of the Convention of Law of the Sea that will be protecting marine life in the ocean, and IC will be supplying to that part a database and also a system that will be developing capacities of countries to protect marine life. So from observations to management of the ocean, protection of the ocean, to also educating people about the role of the ocean. That's what we do. And we do it also together with our partners that are on the panel, because we all serve the same purpose, to make the world more knowledgeable and also more engaged in protecting our planet Earth and its biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vladimir, for highlighting the critical importance of the oceans for planetary sustainability and the excellent work of IUC to safeguard its functions and the science related to the ocean. So let me now address Dr. Humberto Delgado Rosa. Humberto, let me first thank you again for being with us today. It's a great honor for us. Now, as the Director of Natural Capital at the Environmental Directorate of the European Commission, what impacts do you think the COVID-19 crisis has had on the appreciation of policymakers and the public at large of the importance of halting the erosion of biodiversity and of natural capital? Over to you, Humberto.
Thank you, Peter. Actually, it's my honor and pleasure to be with this panel and share some thoughts with you. Well, let's say, of course, the first impact is everyone's minds go to health, safety, and livelihoods, wages, employment, the economy. So the social and economic consequences of COVID prevailed as first wave, naturally diverting resources and attentions to it. But, and this is an important but, there's other impacts coming, such as the question, how is this possible? How have we come here? How can such a small biological entity overturn these powerful technological societies of these powerful beings we are? So I think there's an element that also comes from the COVID-19 crisis. First, from its natural origin, we know that this viral outbreak and others in the past and others in the future, if we keep business as usual, come from the encroachment of humans on nature, misuse of wildlife, destruction of natural habitats. So in a way, this reinforces the idea that there's something wrong in the way we are conducting our development, our societies, and we indeed need to live more in harmony with nature. If not, nature will keep sending us what someone has called nature's invoices in the form of extreme weather impacts, or the vastness of the oceans loaded with plastic, or insects vanishing in rural areas, or uncontrollable forest fires ravaging huge tracts of land. So everyone will think there's something wrong, we must change. And there's a third element, which is when we went into confinement, of course, we want to resume our lives. But then do we really want to go to this frenzy of movement, consumption, meetings of so many of us? Is there something to think about quality of life, less pollution, having more meaningful livelihoods with more nature around us? So I do think that the COVID will actually build in with other big global problems that everyone recognizes, notably climate change, but also biodiversity loss, pollution, on the sense that we need resilience and we need change. And luckily, we do have, at least in the European Union, the current European Commission has set as major priority what's called the European Green Deal, which is, of course, has a big focus on climate and biodiversity and environmental problems, but it's also, it has been explicitly labeled as an economic and social agenda. Economic from this bet on climate and environment as a way to promote innovation, efficiency, and the economy, and social from the side of leaving no one behind through a just transition for the sectors that have more difficulty. It has received a vast majority of support from member states, from parliamentarians, from businesses. So it will very clearly remain our approach to recovery. And finally, we will also find that in this wave of investment that will be needed, there are many economic and job opportunities from betting on nature. So the recovery, be it basing on nature restoration, on greening the cities, on tree planting, on agroecological approaches, on overall nature-based solutions, they do bring many opportunities for this priority of bringing back a more sustainable economy. So all in all, I think this will help our green and also digital agendas.
Thank you very, very much, Humberto, for that excellent introduction to the work of the European Commission and your vision on the importance of biodiversity and how our relationship among societies and biodiversity seems to shift, hopefully in favor of stronger biodiversity actions in the future. So thank you very, very much for that. Let me now, dear panelists, address you all with our main discussion question. So as we all know, 2020 is an important year for biodiversity, notably with the development under the Biodiversity Convention of a new post-2020 global biodiversity framework that should contribute to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and place the global community on a path towards realizing the 2050 vision for biodiversity. So in this context, my question to you all is, what solutions would you like to see included in the post-2020 global biodiversity framework? Solutions that also could help us to build back better after the COVID crisis, and with better meaning here, solutions that could help build future societies in harmony with nature, biodiversity, and the climate system. And how can we all work better together to achieve such a future? That's the question for you all. Perhaps Meshtil, would you like to start addressing that question? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that this current pandemic shows again the widespread destruction of ecosystems and biodiversity, and it shows the dramatic consequences for our health and our economy, as was just mentioned also by Umberto. And it jeopardizes our common path towards achieving the SDGs. You know that COVID-19, like Ebola and SARS, as a zoonotic disease where the virus jumps from the species barrier from a wild host to the human population. And scientists consider that the widespread environmental degradation, in particular the destruction of wildlife habitats, as well as the bushmeat trade, are facilitating such diseases. And better conservation of large, intact natural areas, including natural World Heritage sites, and urgent measures to address illegal wildlife trade are really considered important to limit the emergence of new diseases in the future. We therefore really hope that the post-2020 global biodiversity framework will include ambitious targets to increase the area of our planet set aside for the conservation of biodiversity. But the focus should not only be on gazetting new protected areas, but also on creating enabling conditions that these areas can fulfill their biodiversity conservation objectives. At present, even natural World Heritage sites, which should be the jewels of protected areas, are underfunded, understaffed, and adversely impacted by industrial development such as mining, oil exploration, hydropower dams, or other projects. And I think we need a stronger commitment from all governments to conserve and manage these areas, to exclude them from unsustainable development activities. And I think also we need increased solidarity and cooperation among nations to achieve that. If we can ensure the protection and sustainable use of much larger parts of the planet, we will not only protect biodiversity, but this will also help addressing climate change by increasing carbon sequestration and other natural solutions provided by nature. I also want to stress here the heritage value of nature. Biodiversity conservation is not just about safeguarding the ecosystem services we need to survive. It is also about our own identity as a species. Without nature, we lose our humanity. I think COVID-19 is a way to remind us humans to be more humble. We are part of ecosystems of this planet, and we are part of nature. Many cultures in this world are based on the respect for nature. And we need to go back to respecting nature, and we need a new global deal for nature to achieve that. The post-2020 framework is our opportunity to achieve this new deal, including jointly with all the other 8 biodiversity conventions, as World Heritage is one of them. And I think to conclude on this point is, I think we need to collaborate to enhance more synergies and linkages, including connectivity between the different ecosystems. This is essential. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much, Meshdil, for providing a full list of concrete solution suggestions for the framework. Thank you very much for that. Vladimir, over to you. Solutions related to the oceans you would like to see in the biodiversity framework?
Thank you very much, Peter. You know, I will be very, I think, specific on this point. We are in touch with the Commission for Biological Diversity and supply to them our proposals for the post-2020 framework. You know, this is indeed a chance, and I would like to present you a very simple vision of how we hope this framework will work for the ocean. So I already spoke about the observations of the ocean that make the necessary contribution for our understanding of the ocean. But still, we know from 10 to 25% of species that exist in the ocean. So we don't understand it too well. So the idea is that we have to move from the current state of, I would say, irregular, sometimes illegal use of resources of the ocean to a scientifically ecosystem-based management of the ocean. And there are some ways of doing this. This is for the coastal zone, an approach which is called coastal zone management. For the offshore area, there are some maritime special planning approaches, and we have excellent cooperation with the European Commission in this sense, trying to promote the idea of a maritime special planning for the whole world. And for the areas beyond national jurisdiction, there is a new law that is emerging, but they all have to be dependent on science. So the vision is that we will implement after 2020 a decade of ocean science, a United Nations decade of ocean science for sustainable development. We are preparing now an implementation plan for that decade. And the main idea is to develop the capacity of science to provide solutions, to observe, to provide policies, and also create an enabling environment for the businesses, also for the general public who will be more ocean literate for productive, but at the same time sustainable action in the ocean. So by developing the capacity of science to observe and to the capacity to protect the ocean, including marine protected areas that are efficient. For now, we have different types of marine protected areas. When we think about how fully they protect, what they protect, it's not so efficient system at the moment. So we have to really upgrade the efficiency of ocean protection on the basis of science and good policies. That would be the way forward that we would like to implement after the 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir, for underlining again the global importance of the oceans and the critical contributions of science towards our better understanding of the oceans and their protection, and highlighting also the upcoming decade of ocean science, the UN decade coordinated, spearheaded by IOC. Thank you very much for that, Vladimir. Humberto, would you like to continue on the question on solutions and the biodiversity framework in the European Commission context?
Yes, absolutely. You know, also because the question is extremely opportune because the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030 is just coming out. And I've referred to this EU Green Deal in which there is actually unprecedented ambition on biodiversity. Not only through expressions like protecting and restoring ecosystems must guide all of our work, but especially because the ambition was set at the level of the EU living in biodiversity as it has done for climate change. And of course, European leadership can only mean living by example. So if you take a close look to the biodiversity strategy, you will find there, I think, a rather transformative agenda, including this leading by example in the sense of what are EU commitments, measures, quantified targets that will be delivered to address biodiversity loss. So of course, you will find there on protection, increased ambition to protected areas or equivalent, and not just nature parks for sure, also how to effectively manage them. You'll also find there a rather ambitious restoration agenda touching from forests to the oceans, fisheries, wetlands, agricultural land, even the cities, wherever we can, through active restoration or passive restoration, make nature return and come back. And you'll also find a lot there about enabling change on governance, on funding, on working with business, on knowledge, on mainstreaming in the sectors. So in a nutshell, that this gives you an idea of what the EU would like to see happening globally. And first, I would say, for us, it will be very important to have appropriate goal setting. We have learned from the past that when you have quantified targets, you usually get to them. When you only have aspirational targets, it's more difficult to really make a change. So we think the world should agree on some meaningful, short and understandable global targets addressing biodiversity, addressing all the three objectives of the convention, which is conservation, sustainable use, benefit sharing. Also, we also want, of course, to address the means of cooperation, resource mobilization, capacity building that are needed to bring everyone on board all over the world. And certainly not less important, we expect to have something different on process and governance, in the sense that we need to bring into the Convention of Biological Diversity these elements of being measurable, being reportable and verifiable, that allows all of us to know where we are, what each partner is doing, and if we need to increase our ambition. So finally, underlying all this big push for the understanding that nature delivers a lot of benefits for people, including climate benefits. So these nature-based solutions, we can call it ecosystem-based approaches, whatever terminology is not a crucial issue. The essence is the understanding that nature is a helper, and many of the solutions we need are out there. If we can allow it to bring them back, should be enshrined also with appropriate targets and strategic vision in the upcoming global framework for biodiversity post-2030. That's what we will aim at.
Thank you very much, Humberto, and for giving some insights into the new EU biodiversity strategy with which the EU seeks to promote, by leading by example, global actions on biodiversity. Thank you very, very much for that. So now, Miguel, your take on solutions and the framework. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. And how we could do better, achieve a better future. I think we had already some very alarming voices. I recall the last report of the International Panel for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, Apes. The report was published in UNESCO, saying that in the next 10 years we may lose around 1 million species, just because we are tapping too much into nature. And I think all the panelists said that. And there's the origin of this virus, for example, is really an overuse and a misuse of nature. And by the way, I would like also to mention, we're talking about this COVID virus, but there are also other viruses. Right now, there is a virus on tomato plants. This is, of course, not harmful to human being, but harmful to one vegetable that is very important. And we could imagine similar attacks, let's say, or similar outspreads of this sort of diseases due to overuse or misuse of nature. And then when talking here about nature-based solutions out of these crises, of course, we believe a lot in technical solutions, vaccines, medicines, and all this. But we still, it's not on the agenda when talking about ecological restoration, the term we had it already today. And also really to have a more concrete engagement of countries in the present models that exist. You heard some figures already, but I would say concerning the Biosphere Reserves, the Biosphere Program, for example, they are still, we are working in 124 countries, so there are still 70 countries worldwide missing in this program. And I would really like also to use this opportunity to make a call to all these countries to come on board not just with this program, but in general, I think it's also valid for the oceans that are not really always under national sovereignty, but it's the same call for the countries to come really on board to take this seriously. I mean, we have excellent programs working, doing, but we need to get this global coalition working. We here in UNESCO and also in the European Union, we have many tools. These tools are very complementary, working in the same direction. And it's good that the tools are also a little bit different, because you can tackle these problems from different angles. And there is no final solution to something. I mean, we have to see how this moves forward. It's a little bit like a virus that is also muting, changing. We have also to change our minds and to see how to get it together. But really this more concrete engagement of countries, it is very important. And we have unfortunately seen that concerning, I mean, the Paris Agreement, it was a very major step forward, followed by then a stepping out of some countries. And I think this is regrettable, because it took us so much to come to this agreement on biodiversity conservation, on climate change, on all these issues that go together. Because it's not just having the sites or having more areas. I think it is really to get concrete work done on the ground, to get really these solutions that we have mentioned here all, and to see how at the global scale we move forward. I think from the UN and from other EU also, but we have very good mechanisms. But sometimes it stays only at the level of words. We need a more concrete engagement. I think to have these solutions applied, I think the sites are quite useful, because one must also prove, one must deliver an evidence. Whenever something is done, did the situation improve? And it's also very important to see the link between human and nature. There is not nature and there are humans, and we are sort of antagonistic. No, we are part of nature. We are nature. When I talked earlier on our cousins, the apes, I mean, we are part of all this. So it's always to see this together, to move this together. And so this goes also with the well-being of people, like biodiversity in cities. This goes with job creation, with income generation. But of course, we need that these sites are resilient, that there is not an overuse. I mean, this famous course, we are already, as of September, or sometimes they say July, August, overusing the world's resources. We must come back to the stage that we are like a good managed, let's say, forest. We use only the resources that are recreated and not overusing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miguel, for taking us up to the kind of the global level and the importance of international collaboration and solidarity, and the basic fact that humans indeed are part of nature. So thank you very much. Well, we don't have too much time, but all of you have provided several very important points related to the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And listening to your fellow panelists, are there any comments you would like to make or points you would like to add to the discussion? And if so, perhaps Humberto, would you like to start?
Yes, actually, I've heard many issues. Let me just pick on some of them. First, I think it's very important that we unite our efforts indeed on this issue of addressing illegal wildlife trade, the unregulated consumption and use of wildlife, the anti-poaching, because that's one of the elements related to this COVID crisis that will stay for long in the minds of everyone. So that's a very important area of action. But wider than that, I do think that this perception that, we have often spoken of sustainable development as having three pillars, which would be the environment, society, and the economy. But we are learning there are no three pillars, there are three layers. And there's only one underlying layer, which is the one that sustains the others. You can call it the environment, the biosphere, or nature. Actually, nature sustains life systems on Earth, including human life. And we need to make this understandable. Yes, we are part of nature, but more than that, we need more nature, not for the sake of nature, but for the sake of humans. And it's also beautiful, nature. So it's really a moment when we should give one step back, because it's for our benefit, and we will all have better quality of lives with more nature around us. And this strong message is not yet fully ingrained in the minds of everyone. Climate change has climbed up the ladder of political attention. I think biodiversity is getting there, and the COVID, and especially the post-COVID, and the way we should recover should bring us together on this. And I think we are very aligned, all of us, in what we said around it.
Thank you very much, Umberto, for those additional points. Very well taken. Miguel, the floor is yours again, if you would like to add something. Any comments?
Yeah, thank you very much. Briefly, Peter, and very briefly, just following up what Umberto said, we need more nature. And I think I would like to quote here the DG, our Director General, in the last General Conference. She mentioned really, we need more of these sites, and we need more larger sites. We have, for example, CBD, the Convention of Biological Diversity, gave us this target in the new biodiversity framework to come to 30% of the terrestrial surface protected, 10% strictly protected. And I already gave some figures for the MAP program, from 5% protected and 1.5% strictly protected. This ends up to a surface today of Australia. Sounds big, but it is not. It is really not big. It's a good start, I would say. We have a target. We have a challenge to go there. When I say we, it's of course not us, the UN system or other international agencies. It's really the world community, and of course responsible for this, the governments. And but not only the national, also the regional, local governments. We can achieve this target. I think it's absolutely feasible. Again, the tools are there. I think they're well defined. The needs are more than ever redefined by this crisis. So let's go for it. Let's have it as a positive notice. We notice that something is deeply wrong. We have the chance, another chance, I think, to do it and to do it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Indeed, that you give an optimistic twist to this, and that is always very welcome. Mechtild, any comments or points you would like to make?
Yes, thank you. And I agree with my fellow panelists on some of the points which were raised and which brought us together. I also think that heritage is our legacy from the past, what we live with today and what we pass on to future generations. So our cultural and natural heritage are both irreplaceable sources of life and of inspirations. And I think this is a very strong lesson from World Heritage. Our solutions are not only in nature, but in the long and intimate relationship between people and nature, as was just mentioned also by Umberto. And I would like to all of us to rediscover, to encourage you to rediscover our UNESCO World Heritage Sites, Biosphere Reserves, and the ocean world. And I think for the post-crisis recovery, I think there needs to be a total change in approaches. For example, we need truly sustainable and resilient tourism at our sites. And in that sense, I wish all of us a happy International Day for Cultural Diversity on the 21st of May and a happy Biodiversity Day on 22nd of May. Thank you.
Thank you, Mechtild. Now we have more to celebrate. The more the better. Thank you very much, and for underlining that the solutions are in nature, but in order to discover and reconnect to them, we need culture as well. So thank you very much. Vladimir, any comments or additional remarks from your side?
Thank you very much, Peter. I would like to also to conclude by saying that I was very happy to participate in this I think very good panel. You know, my message would be I will try to make it also clear and quite short. So, you know, coming back, we cannot call it coming back to normal, because it was not normal. So we need to come back, as you say, better. And this comeback to a better world, I think, should lead to much better understanding of the role of science. The science has to really make this world working in a sustainable way. But science is difficult. So, and because of that, I would like also to take the message that Myrtle just made, because, you know, it is education and science changing the brains of people. This is exactly what is the idea of the UNESCO logo on the climate change. Do not change the climate, change the minds of people. And I think if we work together towards biodiversity, then it doesn't really mean direct work on protecting something. That is also required, but changing minds of people, working together, being more supportive to multilateralism relations, working with our partners like European Commission, that is a leader in this area, bringing together the understanding of the importance of us as a part of nature is the way forward. And I think that the coronavirus crisis also teaches us like this. So we have to learn the lesson. Thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir. As we are running out of time, and unless you have some absolutely burning last point, I think you actually summarized the discussion and the panel very elegantly. Changing minds is an important topic for the global community, and it's one of the mottos of UNESCO, and we do that through indeed science, education, culture, communication, and information globally. And Miguel and Mestre, you have also mentioned our important networks of sites around the world where we engage with member states to protect, conserve, and share the benefits from sustainable use of biodiversity. So I think you have highlighted important tools that are at the disposal of UNESCO member states. And of course, IOC working on oceans, you are key gatekeepers for making ocean science moving forward to the benefit of society. And we also learned a lot from Umberto and the great work of the European Commission and the ambitions of the European Union within the framework of the new biodiversity framework. So thank you all very, very much for your insights and discussion in this panel, which I recall is a panel in a series of panels organized by UNESCO as part of its celebrations of the 2020 International Day for Biological Diversity. So I think with this, I would simply like to thank you again and to close this panel by saying stay safe, keep biodiversity safe, and as underlined by our eminent panelists, in line with the theme of the International Day for Biological Diversity, our solutions are in nature. So with that, thank you all very much and goodbye from me.